This morning on Awareness, we take a look at mental health issues in our community. Also, a story of trial and triumph, how one woman lived to tell the story of life after attempted suicide. Plus, preventing teenage pregnancy statewide. Join us right now for Awareness.
Engaging the community since 1970. This is WIS Awareness.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. According to the National Institutes of Health, in a given year, about 1 in 5 or close to 44 million American adults will experience mental illness. Last year, 60% of adults with mental illness did not seek treatment. Sometimes it's because of the stigma surrounding mental health that the depression, panic attacks, and anxiety, for example, are signs of weakness. Chances are you have been affected by mental illness, either personally or someone you know, and it may very well be a secret. This morning, no secrets, just open dialogue about what mental illness looks like and how you can get the help you need. We have a panel of professionals ready to talk about taking care of your mental health. Markeisha Miller, a licensed counselor with Holistic Psychological Associates in Columbia. Alicia Anderson-Brown with Empowered Connections, a local nonprofit providing resources and support for women and families. And Lydia Bailey-Paget, Community Outreach Coordinator for the Lee Thompson Young Foundation, named in memory of the Columbia-born actor Lee Thompson Young, who struggled with mental illness for years. Ladies, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
I want to briefly start with the work you do in the community. Markeisha, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I am a licensed psychotherapist here in Columbia with a private practice, so I treat individuals, families, and group work, as well as serving as the clinical coordinator for South University, in which I actually teach and prepare graduate students to become counselors in the community.
And Lydia?
I'm a community outreach coordinator with the Lee Thompson Young Foundation, where we provide psychoeducation, individual group therapy, talk about signs and symptoms, and we are working with the school systems to create a program to educate the staff, the faculty on the signs and symptoms and match them up with resources.
Right.
I am the clinical director for Empowered Connection, a new not-for-profit. What we do is really serve families, children who are affected by domestic violence, an array of services from mental health, substance use disorders, and just try to connect them back into the community with whatever they need.
And what are some of the challenges you see in your line of work with getting people the resources and treatment they need? Is it really because the stigma is still very much out there?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think definitely so. I think that one of the things that I see many times is I may be able to identify that there is a need, this individual needs to seek the treatment, but many times it's met with resistance. And I think, I see many times it may be something that's deeply rooted because for particularly minorities, there is a distrust for the medical profession. And especially when we talk about mental illness, there's a stigma that comes with that. And it's this idea that it instantly links to crazy. And so I think when that comes to play, it becomes this idea that, no, I'm not crazy. So any resource that you put beforehand kind of links to that. So it's met with a lot of resistance.
And I see the two of you agreeing pretty vehemently.
Yes. And kind of piggyback on that with the resistance of not having trust with the medical community. Another thing that I'm finding is they're not comfortable leaving their community to talk about mental health issues. And so what the Lee Thompson Young Foundation really prides itself on is going into the community, going to the churches, going into nonprofit organizations within the community and allowing them the venue to talk about what they're experiencing. So that's been effective as well.
Right.
And I know there really is no one answer to this next question, but Markeisha, you talked about people equating mental illness with crazy.
Yes.
But what does mental illness look like?
I think it looks like different things with different people, and that's the idea, that it's nothing that we can really put a finger on to identify.
Or face to.
Absolutely, and I think that that's where so many people become stuck because they're trying to put it into a box, and it can't be. So I think it depends on if we're talking about depression, there are certain symptoms and signs that we will look for. If we're talking about anxiety, the same thing. If we're talking about bipolar, there's signs and symptoms that we would look for, but I don't think that there is any particular aspect that we can assign to any particular illness.
How important is having a support system for a person?
That's big.
Now, well, let me ask you this though. Do you think a support system can be a hindrance sometimes, can make someone think, oh, you don't really need the help? You know, we'll just talk it out as girlfriends and help you get through it.
It can, even in family systems, it can be that, oh, well, you have a lot of support, so you don't need services. Services are different than family support. And I think making sure that families understand the depth of mental illness is something that's very important, because treatment is needed for these individuals to function further in their life. And ongoing treatment as well. Like you had asked a question earlier, we were just chatting about, do you ever get over it? People who experience mental illness don't get over it. They spiral at times, they go up and down. There's good days, there's bad days. So treatment is designed to really assist those individuals with the long term, and support can be viewed as treatment, and they're two different.
Well, and going into that, I don't know if you wanted to respond there, but are there certain triggers that people can sometimes, or pitfalls that they can fall into, whether they feel like, you know, I've mastered this, I've overcome this, but that dark place is still out there lingering somewhere?
Well, a lot of times what happens when individuals start treatment and they have talk therapy and they have the medication, and they start to feel excited, happy, and feel that some of the symptoms have lifted. But what's important is to let them know that it's about coping skills and making sure that they're maintaining and they're aware of any stressors that could lead them to fall back in that so-called pitfall. And so with that, you need to make sure that the support system is educated as well about signs and symptoms, and not be so taken aback or oblivious to
it.
Correct.
Well, and there was one example. There was a Black Lives Matter activist who killed himself on the State House steps in Ohio. And if you look at his Facebook page, it really runs the gamut. You've got these positive, uplifting posts followed by very dark posts. And I believe his last post said, quote, my demons won today, I'm sorry.
Right.
That was the very last post. So, I mean, he had a litany going on here. So, and not pulling on this specific example, but when people see some of these signs, what should they do?
You know, when I read that, and that last post, it really got me. And it got me because of the fact, when you think about my demons got me today, I equate that. I think so much of mental illness sometimes is discussed within our church organizations. And I think sometimes the way that it's looked at, mental illness is not identified as being a demon or identified as being something that's bad, so to speak. It is what is stated. It's an illness. And so it's something that we have to work to be educated about. It's something that we have to work to understand, how do we properly manage and treat with that. Looking at depression, I feel that this young man was going through a period of depression, and we know that depression becomes highly rated among African Americans, particularly with females more so. And a lot of people don't realize that, but depression is a chemical imbalance. That's what it's medically defined as, but there are environmental factors and stressors that can definitely affect that. And so when you think about being an African American male, I think that's what was identified with this young man. He was going through the various things that are identified with being a minority in society. And so absolutely, that takes it to a big pitfall.
But you
And
said,
one thing,
I'm sorry, no, you go.
well, one thing you that struck me earlier that I hear often, well, it's a sign of weakness when I'm not doing. And in our community, we equate that with weakness, and that is not the case. So when you talk about the language and how we describe the symptoms and what individuals are feeling, a lot of people probably didn't know how to respond to that because they didn't want to, offend the person, or they were not educated enough about the symptoms and they didn't want to feel like they were overstepping their bounds. And so I think we need to have more conversations like this. We need to have more conversations in the community. We need to be able to talk about it normal, like you said earlier. It has to be taken to a point where it's so simplified. So when we see something, correct, and we can do more preventive work.
Well, and I want to thank you, ladies, for really just beginning this conversation with us. I'm going to have you back.
Yes, we would love it. Yes.
Well, stay with us. Still to come on Awareness. A young girl who battled with self-image and sickness grew to know a tormented adulthood. How her story of surviving several suicide attempts. That's coming up after.
There is nothing like getting a call from your sister's husband while you're at work, letting you know that your sister just attempted suicide, and she's in the hospital on life support. I received that call. I remember the day vaguely. I remember my feelings even more. I was hurt. I was angry at my sister for trying to take herself away from the people that loved her.
Welcome back to Awareness. As we continue our conversation on mental illness, it's important to talk about how the results of not getting treatment can leave a lasting impact on our loved ones. Joining us now is Falana Williams-Jones, a suicide survivor. That voice you heard moments ago was Falana's sister recalling how she felt after learning of her sister's suicide attempt. We know suicide does not just affect that person involved, but all of those who love you and who you love. Now, Falana, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Megan.
What brought you to that point?
Just a lot of different things, anguish, frustrations, hurts, and have been through some things with a spouse that just felt like it was just too much, just couldn't do it anymore. And so I chose the road out, and basically I was choosing a permanent way out for a temporary situation.
And at that point, you didn't see any other options to you?
I didn't. I sure didn't.
And when you were younger, you told me you made a couple of attempts, one or two, because you had been so sick. Tell us about that experience.
Yes. Growing up, I experienced a lot of sickness, a lot of surgeries, a lot of female issues, pains, and then again, just really tired. Just tired of feeling those pains, tired of being in the hospital, tired of being poked and probed on, and you just get tired. You just don't. That's just not a way of living life. Once again, choosing a permanent way out for a temporary situation.
Right. But we're so glad to see you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Making it through. How did you get through that point when you woke up in that hospital bed?
When I woke up in that hospital bed, I realized that I was still here and that God had a purpose for me. And I just had to go find it. And I went after that 100%, looking for that purpose.
And how did you do that? Because saying that and thinking, okay, I'm going to choose to have a positive mindset is one thing, but actually doing that is something else, and living it is something else entirely.
Yes, totally different. Realizing some negativity, some self-talk that I had that wasn't good. I was determined that I was not going to have those thoughts, but it took a while. One of the books that I read was The Power of Positive Thinking, and I went after that. And so there were times when I would have negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts, I would go a week with one sometimes, and then I had to go down. Each time I had a negative thought or I was mad about something, I had less time to focus on that.
So you're saying you would address it. You'd say, okay, I'm going to give myself a week to address this, to be mad about it, to have a pity party, whatever.
Yes.
And then eventually that time frame would cut down, and then you would just try to work through it.
Yes.
Positively.
Yes.
What about your circle of friends and negative people? Did you have to close yourself off some?
Definitely, most definitely. You have to. You cannot allow those things to inoculate you because you're not really that strong to push against it. So yes, my circle became very, very small. I only wanted to deal with people who were positive, who were going places, who had positive things to say and kept a positive attitude, because that made me want to be in that same place. And when I got through all of this, I was able to be around some negative people and just kind of block those things out. But until I was strong enough to do that, most definitely my circle was small and positive.
And we heard in our previous segment that there are always those triggers and those pitfalls that can reoccur. So how do you avoid those?
Yes, and by listening to the earlier segment, yes, there are some triggers, but you have to recognize them. You have to be aware of your triggers. And once you start falling down that road, that downhill spiral, you have to do something, and you have to be aware when it's out of your hands, when you no longer can control it, then most definitely you need to speak to someone.
Well, I was going to ask you, so did you choose to seek professional help? Do you encourage others to do so?
I did not, because I had a lot of counseling, so I really knew the tools to use. I just chose not to use them, but I would encourage most definitely people to please go get professional help.
And what do you say to people out there who might be currently in a situation you once were?
Please reach out to someone. You're loved. I guess as you could hear when my sister, I was loved, and people do love you. And I also was shown that love by a room full of balloons. The whole backside of my hospital room was filled with balloons. So there are people that love you. There are people who want to hear about what's going on with you and help you. Don't close yourself off to that point. Don't think it's something to be ashamed of when it's not.
Right, you are certainly not alone. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me, and I hope it just helps someone.
Yes, me too.
Thank you.
When awareness returns, shifting gears a little, taking proactive steps to prevent teen pregnancy. How South Carolina is working to continue spreading awareness about lowering our teen birth rate. And a little trivia before we go to break. 1 in 4 girls in South Carolina will become pregnant before they reach what age? Is it A, 16, B, 18, C, 20, or D, 25? Find out after the break. One in 4 girls in South Carolina will become pregnant before their 20th birthday. According to SC Campaign, less than half of teenage mothers in the state graduate from high school. Welcome back to Awareness. The SC Campaign has been working to improve these statistics. This month, they are taking its show on the road, visiting 30 counties to bring awareness to teen pregnancy. Joining me now, a champion for the cause for 15 years, South Carolina Campaigns to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, CEO Forrest Alton. Forrest, thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, since 1994, the organization has been working really hard to cut down on those pretty high statistics. You've made substantial progress in that time. What do you attribute to that?
Well, you're exactly right. A 61% decline in the last 20 years. And this is remarkable. You'd be hard-pressed to find another public health or social service issue that's seen this type of decline. First and foremost, we need to give some credit to young people themselves, right?
Sure.
They're quite frankly making better decisions now than generations before them. And the other thing I think that's really important is conversations like this one and the road show like we're on this month, which continues to remind people this is an issue that's not only okay to talk about, we have to talk about it. That's
right,
exactly
you just talk
right.
about it. So what is the aim for this roadshow?
Well, I think 2 things. Number 1, to say progress is possible. You know, there are lots of people who used to think we can't do anything about this issue. 20 years later and 61% decline in the teen birth rate, we've shown we can do something about this issue. The second message of the roadshow is, though, let's not forget we have a lot of work to do. And everybody in the community, from schools to faith communities, nonprofit organizations, the business community, all have a role to play when it comes to investing in our children.
Well, because we still have the 13th highest teen birth rate in the nation, so still a lot of work to be done. What are some of the challenges you find when you go out there and you're talking to these families and these teens?
Well, you know, South Carolina is a state that does have great needs, and we need to make sure that we're bringing together conversations about education, conversations about access to health care, conversations about, you know, strong family values, all of these kind of things. There's no single solution here. If there was, we wouldn't have such a problem, right? So making sure that we understand there's room at the table for everyone. There are a variety of different approaches that people might find appropriate in their community, helping them figure out what's going to fit best, combined with helping them understand what evidence shows has been effective. Putting those things together makes a big difference.
Do you have any tips for parents who want to begin this sometimes awkward conversation with their kids?
Well, I think it is sometimes awkward, and the tip here is, Mom and Dad, you are important, and your young people are listening, whether you believe it or not. Over and over and over, young people tell us they would be able to make better decisions about this issue if they could have open, honest conversations with their parents. And key words here being open and honest, right? We need to be willing to have a dialogue, not just provide a lecture.
And Forrest, you've been very dedicated to this organization for 15 years, 9 years as CEO, and your reign is now coming to an end. You're stepping down. What is next for you, and how did you make this really tough decision?
Oh, it's a good question. I think what makes this decision easy is knowing the really good people that are in communities all over South Carolina and knowing the really strong team we have at the South Carolina Campaign. This work will continue. I've been really fortunate to be a part of it, and quite frankly will continue to be a part of it, just from a slightly different chair. It's time for the organization to go on to its next chapter, and me too, and we look forward to figuring out what those look like.
Well, thank you for your continued advocacy. We really appreciate working with you and having you on Awareness.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Still to come, we'll be right back with the final thought. We all have issues in life to deal with. What's important is addressing the issues head on and getting the proper help. There are resources available. You don't have to suffer in silence. Sometimes what we need is a little inspiration to keep going. For some additional encouragement this morning, here is one of our past awareness guests, love and lifestyle coach Angela Carr-Patterson.
Let's face it, life can be tough sometimes. I've even felt like quitting, but you'll never be able to see your dreams realized if you quit. When the farmer plants the Chinese bamboo tree, nothing happens for at least 4 years. And then on the 5th year, that tree grows 80 feet in 6 weeks. Now, did it lie dormant for the first 4 years? No. It was growing its roots in order to handle the height it would reach. Even though there was no sign of growth or progress, something was happening down below. So it is with you. It may not seem like what you're doing is working, but it is. And if you give up, you'll never enjoy the highest peak of your dreams. So stay the course, remain steady, even when there's no evidence that what you're doing is working. When the proper conditions are met, your dreams can and will become a reality for you. So take the leap of faith, because it truly is your time to shine.
We want to hear from you. Continue the conversation with us on social media. And if you ever miss a show or you just want to see it again, visit our WIS Awareness Facebook page. Just search Awareness 10. I'd like to thank all of our guests this morning. Until next time, I'm Megan Norman. This is Awareness.